To commemorate the first Jewish synagogue in New York and America, the Mill Street Synagogue, a plaque for which is across the street on William Street. Further up the block, there is a renaming of a street for Mill Street, Gershom Mendez Way. And we're also here to give out the Gershom Mendez Award for Religious Tolerance, which is one of the gifts of this nation to the world and something that we seek to recall each year. One of the features of our events is that usually people learn a few things that they didn't know before. I call on Rabbi Nisi Aber in the downtown synagogue.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, in year 2248, the Hebrew calendar, the Jewish people left Egypt. A few days later, Pharaoh has buyer's remorse. Oh my, I let them go. So he decides he's going to chase after the ancient Israelites. The seventh day of Passover approaches, and the Jewish people are trapped. On one side is the ocean, the sea. On the other side is the Egyptians that are looking to eradicate, that are looking to bring them back to Egypt as slaves. And then, on the seventh day of Passover, the story that many of us are familiar with from the Bible, the great miracle happens and the ocean parts. The Jewish people cross the ocean, and then their enemies, the Egyptians, drown, and there goes all their tsuris, all their problems go together with that, and they are finally free. Fast forward approximately 3,000 years. It's 1654. 23 Jews leave Recife, Brazil. Welcome to New York, everybody. 23 Jews leave Recife, Brazil. And they come to these shores, and they want to settle in New Amsterdam. But Peter Stuyvesant refused entry. He did not want another minority. He did not want Jews in New Amsterdam. After much pressure, that decision was appealed with a few conditions. Number one, that this community of Jews should not be a burden upon the small community of New Amsterdam. And number two, if they would like to celebrate their Judaism, it has to be private. This is where they settled. And at that point, they founded the community of She'eris Israel. But then, fast forward a few more years. The year is 1730. When the Jewish community of New Amsterdam, they felt comfortable enough to celebrate their Judaism publicly. And on the seventh day of Passover, they inaugurated their new community with a new structure, a new synagogue, on what was called back then Mill Lane. And that was the first structure of a synagogue in the U.S. The question I always get is, well, Rabbi, what about Rhode Island? That came 35 years later. So today, I am proud to say that, thank God, Lower Manhattan is back, and the Jewish community on Mill Street Synagogue on South William Street is black. God bless you all. God bless America. Shabbat Shalom.
And I'd like to call on our borough president, Mark Levine.
Thank you everyone here for telling this story, for keeping this history alive in a place that is essential to the story of America. essential to the story of the Jewish people in America. Right here in this little 1 square mile, it all began, and it is in part an uplifting story about the history of religious tolerance in this country. And the Mill Street Synagogue plays a critical role in that story. The letter that George Washington penned in that later era cemented the spirit of tolerance in a country which has welcomed the Jewish community now for hundreds of years, created a great haven for us. New York City has ultimately become the largest Jewish community in the world, a place where we have an opportunity to fulfill our dreams in every sector of life. And to understand how that happens, you need to know the story of the Mill Street Synagogue. So to see it commemorated in this way is incredibly moving and meaningful.
Sir, we are privileged to have the chair of Community Board number 1 here with us today.
Because this is number 1, which also signifies number 1, meaning the first synagogue in North America. So it's very fitting that we're here today. The thing that strikes me on a daily basis, when you take a look at the plaque and you think about the history of not just Lower Manhattan, not New York, but the history of America. We were founded on diversity. Diversity was the strength that built our country. The synagogue is an important remembrance of that and a symbol of when we celebrate our diversity of religion, of race, of every kind, we are stronger as a nation and a community.
As a student of the American Revolution, you realize that 2 of the principles of the American Revolution were individual liberty and religious tolerance. And Gershon Mendes Seixas was a big advocate of that, helped to put into the Constitution that there's no religious test for office. But the fight for tolerance didn't end with the American Revolution. And this year, we want to recognize a man who for years has been spreading the gospel of tolerance, in part by teaching what happens when tolerance isn't there. Stories of the Holocaust from the records and from the people who've survived. So it's my privilege, Peter, on behalf of the New York Historical Association, to present the Gershon Mendes Seixas Religious Freedom Award to the President and CEO of the Tour for Tolerance, someone known to many of us here as a champion of what this award is supposed to represent.
Distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, I'm humble and grateful to receive the Gershon Mendes Seixas Award for Religious Freedom and Tolerance, to be recognized as a steward alongside the action path of walking in the open shadows of great leaders such as George Washington, Gershon Mendes Seixas, Abraham Lincoln, Dr. Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Winston Churchill. Is a tremendous honor and privilege. From the early days of our nation's history, George Washington recognized that religious freedom was a fundamental right that must be protected. He wrote in his famous letter to the Hebrews congregation of Newport that all possesses alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship, regardless of their faith. Abraham Lincoln also understood the critical nature of religion and or religious freedom. In his Gettysburg Address, he spoke of a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all are created equal. With the legacy of George Washington, Gershon Mendez, Dr. Martin Luther King, I am confident that we will achieve all goals of creating a world where people of all faith can live together in harmony and in peace. Thank you once again, and I am most honored.
Our co-founder and chairman, Jim Kaplan, is going to speak, and Carolyn Kaplan will read the famous Newport letter, which is the inspiration for this proceeding and this award. Jim, go ahead.
On the history of the Black-Jewish Alliance and the history of anti-discrimination here in New York City, and how the blacks and the Jews were able to get together and to eliminate religious discrimination and religious preference, and how Harlem became, from the great Jewish community, became the most important black community in the country. Now, I think the point is that there has been an amazing history of an alliance between blacks and Jews to eliminate discrimination here in this city and this country, and it's been a long, hard fight.
Gentlemen, while I receive with much satisfaction your address replete with expressions of affection and esteem, I rejoice in the opportunity of assuring you that I shall always retain a grateful remembrance of the cordial welcome I experienced in my visit to Newport from all classes of citizens. The reflection on the days of difficulty and danger which are past is rendered the more sweet from a consciousness that they are succeeded by days of uncommon prosperity and security. If we have the wisdom to make the best use of the advantages with which we are now favored, we cannot fail, under the just administration of a good government, to become a great and a happy people. The citizens of the United States of America have a right to applaud themselves for having given to mankind examples of an enlarged and liberal policy, a policy worthy of imitation. All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunity of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens, in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. It would be inconsistent with the frankness of my character not to avow that I am pleased with your favorable opinion of my administration and fervent wishes for my felicity. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness in our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and in his own due time and way everlastingly happy. George Washington, thank you.